Welcome to Goddard Riverside Community Center. I'm Florindo Troncellitti from the Green Party and also from Peace Action Manhattan. We're co-sponsoring this event. It's been 15 years since the invasion of Afghanistan, and we've had nothing but endless war. It seems to be expanding. So we want to have a forum here to discuss what the situation is and figure out what, if anything, we can do to try to ameliorate it. The speakers are going to be introduced by Daniel Vila, who's a member of the Green Party and the primary organizer of this event.
I want to thank everybody. My name is Daniel Vila. I'm from the Manhattan Greens. In theory, these wars started in 2001. You all know the story. I could see your faces that you are people that know your history and know contemporary history in particular. But some people actually think, and I'm one of those, that these wars really started with the discovery or the occupation of this continent. I think if we look throughout U.S. history, it's difficult to find a decade, 10 years, in which there have not been military incursions in the name of democracy, or invasions, or occupations, or whatever, or genocides. I have to my right Seyn, Laproyen, and I hope I'm pronouncing it almost correctly, from the Peace Action Manhattan. He is a writer, a historian, and an anti-nuclear activist. So we will begin with Seyn.
So I can give you two certainties. One is whatever I say will be woefully inadequate. The second is I did write some things that are available freely online, which may shed some more light. Most of what I write has to do with proposals, and I think this is the right approach. We should emphasize not just what we are against, but also what we are in favor of. And there I did do some homework, and in addition to these two certainties, which will hold even if I drop dead now, there is the promise that if I don't drop dead and we continue, there may be even better things through some, let's say, collaborative work. I do believe that synergistically we may offer a lot more than what we come to the table with. I mean, what I'm in a position to maybe promise is probably a small subset of what we can do together, obviously. And in saying this, I'm assuming that some of us can go beyond let's say, binary thinking. There has been far too much of binary thinking. It wasn't invented by the so-called capitalists and so-called socialists. Long before them, Christians were guilty of a lot of binary thinking. It's either with us or you're against us. Either you subscribe to our orthodox version of Christianity or to hell with you, whatever. And even before then, who knows what existed. But we seem to continue this, and we just change the two, let's say, antagonists, and say, okay, here's the Muslim terrorists, and here's the defenders of freedom, or whatever. And we assume that if you prove just one side to be the evil guys, you don't need to bother proving that the other guys are the good guys, because there has to be a good guy somewhere. This is how literature is built. This is how movies are made. There has to be some good guy, right? And not realizing that throughout history there had been all shades of gray, and you know, people who do some good work and who do a lot of evil also. And I was introduced as some kind of a historian, and I do know something about history, but I always preface what I want to say with the undisputed fact that most of our past is prehistoric. So history is a relatively recent thing, and whatever it is has a great deal to do with people who are in a position to write, who are able to write monuments, etc. So it's to be doubted anyway, but we have a potential that we can maybe pass judgment on. We have existed on this planet for more than 90% of our story, the prehistoric story, and we did not have nation states, we did not have empires, we did not have religions that claimed to represent everybody to speak to everybody or to assume that every breathing human being is the son of this kind of a god or that kind of. We did not have those things, apparently. We can't ascertain this, but it's easy enough to guess. So if this is the case, we do not have to take for granted the continuation of nation states. We do not have to take that for granted. Even though at present they are running the show, they have armies, etc., and the media, we do not have to take this for granted. And the other thing is, presently there are supposedly strong ideologies. Now, I grew up in Turkey, spent the first half of my life there, and I know something about this kind of ideological rift. It was Cold War before, before I even came here. So at the time, growing through the 70s, when there was a lot of terrorism of a different kind, and I'm sorry to say that we missed that kind of terrorism, where people would say, if you don't do that, we're going to do this. And you wouldn't do that, and they would do that, whatever, A, B, and they would immediately claim responsibility. Those were the good old days. Now people don't even claim responsibility. They don't give you warning. And what is this? Anyway, but there was a lot of, robbery, a lot of terrorism, kidnapping, this and that. And I was growing in an environment where much of the ideological, let's say, division was between the so-called socialists or communists or lefties and the ultranationalists or fascists or whatever you want to call them. And these people imagined that the future belonged to them. They each assumed this. And at the time there was a small minority of Islamic this or that. But people thought that Islam does not have a future. You're lucky if you last another century or something, you'll disappear. Maybe some people were assuming the same thing for Christianity or, I don't know, Judaism. How wrong they were, right? Now, this has much to do with the problems we're facing today. Unfortunately, it seems to me that there's a lot of, let's say, maybe courageous act on the part of some Americans to blame America first, which may be a safe thing to do. America obviously does have a lot more power to do bad things, and Americans are doing bad things. But it would be wrong to assume that if America ceased to do bad things all of a sudden, there would be no other bad guys. This is wrong to assume. And I wrote some things about the philosophy of science also, or some kind of philosophy of social science. And this is a very important point to make. When you're talking about causality, if you say that A causes B, so if I eliminate A, there won't be any B. This is a fallacy. And when it comes to matters like militarism and occupations, invasions, expansionism, this is a deadly fallacy to fall into. It may be convenient for some people, but it obviously, not only is it a fallacy, but it's it would be, at this point, confirming a common verdict on so-called lefties, which is that we are all naive. We don't know about politics, strategy, etc. It would be confirming that. So we should say that even if A ceased to exist, which is, let's say, the United States. United States is an expansionistic power. There's no question about it. They had been expansionistic for centuries. They never gave up. And guess what happened after the end of the so-called Cold War? They wanted to expand NATO instead of, getting rid of it maybe, right? No. So obviously, United States is expansionistic, but if it ceased to be expansionistic, would the world be safer for the smaller powers? I don't know, that depends, I have to say. And there had been times when people who should know better were asked questions like, how do we deal with terrorism? Let's say Chomsky was asked. And I think the first thing that a wise person should have said was that criticizing anti-terroristic acts should not be limited only to those people who come up with solutions. Anybody should be able to criticize these efforts. A child should be able to say, this is wrong. The subsequent question should not be, okay, so what do you want us to do? A child doesn't have to answer that. A child should be able to say, this is wrong. Any moral agent should be able to say, you can't do this. This is inviting more trouble. So if somebody asks a guy like Chomsky or somebody else, okay, you say, well, what do you want us to do? You want to fight terrorism? What are your proposals? I think the first preface should be this. I don't have to give you proposals. But in case you're asking, well, here are a few, and these are subject to criticism also. But in my judgment, terrorism is a moving target. It has to be. It is in its nature. It's foolish to say, oh, yeah, we can get rid of it this way. It will respond to your response to it. So, in my judgment, one thing to say is that this doesn't have to be through nationalistic policies. And it wasn't either, by the way. United States, even under George Bush, did seek global collaboration. They approached Russians, etc. And this is the wise thing to do. But once again, it has to go beyond the efforts of nation states or existing international organizations. I think in this respect, United Nations is not much of an organization to deal with this kind of thing. We don't have any organization to deal with it properly. Throughout the Cold War years, we lived through times when we were aware that either bloc could launch hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear ballistic missiles in less than half an hour and destroy targets within half an hour. Now, neither of these powers could answer a 911 call. They issued no guarantee that we can get there in half an hour. If you are being killed by your boyfriend or husband or whatever, you call us, we give you no guarantee that we'll be there. By the way, this has been ascertained. There was a case in Washington, D.C., the police couldn't get there, and the person who made the call informing on something happening next door was killed, but basically the judge says, yeah, well, what do you think this is? This is not these are not his words, but this is not Domino's Pizza. They don't give you free delivery if they don't come there in half an hour. So, but this is not, I don't hope to, I hope I'm not trivializing it. There are many other threats, far more serious maybe, like natural disasters, where the state gives you no assurance that they can save you. Even in the case of Katrina, where the victims are at sea level, next to one of the most navigable rivers in the world. This country has a lot of airplanes, helicopters, whatever. Did they help the people there? No. So we lived through times when they had a lot of destructive power, nation states and empires, but they have no promise to give you basic security. And there are times when they found it in their interest, apparently, to deny existing threats. They would lie to you about existing diseases, contagious diseases. They would sometimes do things to promote diseases, like Tuskegee experiments, etc. And there were other times when, right after 9/11, they said, oh, the air is safe to breathe. Why are they lying about basic things like that? Well, obviously, your safety is not their concern. So my point is, nation states cannot be relied on. For whatever reason, that they accumulated a lot of reasons. We need things that are beyond nation states, supranational, with enough power to, if necessary, arrest leaders, even if they are, leaders of the free world or whatever. This didn't happen, by the way, with George Bush did it. If you ask me, okay, how are you going to get there? I don't have to give you those answers either. I hope I, prefaced it wisely. But it so happens that everything that we are facing in this regard happens to be human-made. The organizations are human-made. We inherited them. Hopefully, we don't subscribe to religious views that they are shadows of God or something at this point. So if human beings created them, human beings can get ourselves out of these human entanglements. So I'm not talking about anything that requires going against laws of physics. So it can't be that naive. But on the other hand, there are things that are beyond human power that are lurking. There are natural disasters that may be around the corner, we don't know. And once again, I say nation states are not powerful enough to deal with these things. They're not prepared. After 9/11, by the way, before 9/11, I was impressed when the celebrations of year 2000 were truly global, following all around Pacific Islands, etc., going, kind of like a relay race going, okay, you are at 2,000 here, now, blah, 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 all around the world. And I imagined at the time, well, they're doing this only because they can, they're at that point. So maybe there'll be another one in 2001, 2002, but no. While that kind of technology did exist on the ground, there was no technology to predict or to detect a tsunami of the magnitude that we saw in 2004. How come? I don't know. Was not a priority, apparently. So there may be far worse things coming, and the states are not prepared. So what I say is, there are human institutions that we should be able to collectively get rid of, but there are non-human threats facing us, including contagious diseases, for which obviously our societies are not prepared. And with more urbanization, more air travel, more this and that, more possibilities of obviously terrorists spreading diseases, we are getting more and more vulnerable. So we have to point to our collective powerlessness also. We have collectively the power to get rid of our institutions, but even collectively, we do not have the power to deal with certain natural disasters and diseases, etc. Or even insects. Certain insects, mosquitoes are still killing more people than nuclear weapons or any kind of weapons, or the diseases that they spread. So, given these two facts, we have enough in our hands, maybe as a school child, to say, okay, where you're going is not good enough, and there are things that we are not prepared for. And any national leader should be able to face these two facts. Of course, many of them will be inclined to say, oh, we're the good guys. The United States is a force for good in the world, right? Right, it is true. In some respects, it has been a good force, but not good enough. Maybe one credential I may claim here is that since my teenage years, I did not pledge my allegiance to any human institution, to any nation state, any organized church, or blah, blah, blah. So I say there is life. There is life outside this kind of loyalty. Well, at least this much of it, I don't know, such as it is. It's not a comfortable life. It's not a life that is easy to explain to nationalists, by the way, because neither nationalists nor socialists, let's say, nor Catholics or whatever, are, let's say, comfortable comprehending these things. Oh, you mean there are people who are not nationalists or enemies of nationalists? How do they breathe? Well, whatever. So I say, we may not have all the solutions. We don't have to promise all the solutions. And some of this obviously has to be open-ended and open to collaboration. And some of this may include collaboration with our present enemies, so to speak. I think we shouldn't give the impression that we want less security. No, we want more security in more respects, in more fields of our lives. And hopefully this may come at a lower financial cost. But it may take more, let's say, labor-intensive work on our part. More of us may have to volunteer our time and energy and, let's say, intellectual power. We may have to, let's say, deputize ourselves in some respects, and at the same time invite others to watch over our shoulders for our efforts towards security. So I say, when people say that, okay, we have to increase the measures, this and that, our instincts do not have to be against such things. By the way, I'm, among other things, bringing to the table some promise to make contributions to the cause beyond what I was able to do. And part of this may be possible because I'm a victim of the NYPD also. I don't want to bring too much attention to my case, but if I would be remiss if I did not give you the promise that if things are done right, I may get something from, get some of the stuff that I lost to the NYPD back and share it with others. But I wouldn't refuse to work with local police forces or the local firefighting forces, whatever, if I see that, okay, they're in a position to help here and there. At the same time, I don't have to be dogmatic believer in their efficiency, efficacy, etc. I think, I don't know, in terms of time, I can yield this. I'm always open to answering questions, etc. One thing I want to end with is that obviously these conflicts did not start with the United States. There had been conflicts in that region going before the advent of history anyway. And one of the things that I think most people should agree on is that the invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 was one of the dumbest decisions also. It's not that it didn't start with the United States, obviously. And the attack on Iran by Iraq was also another huge dumb mistake. So, not to mention a crime against humanity. So I hope we'll go beyond just blaming the United States. So I yield the floor at this point. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, the world goes round, and I think we all are going to be learning a lot here today, and hopefully we'll have some exchanges, questions and answers and comments, which I think will make for a rich discussion later on. Our next speaker, and incidentally, two other of the speakers have also arrived. So I'm going to introduce Tom, and then I'll go into the seats, and I'll ask the other two speakers to come up here. But our next speaker, Tom Siracuse, has been active with the Green Party for many years. He is a retired teacher, active in his union for many years, very active still around housing and around labor and anti-war efforts. And but also, Tom Siracuse, not too many people know this, is also a Navy veteran. So let me get out of the way, and I will invite also Percy Lujan to come up here, and also Alan Stolzer, come up here, Alan. And I'll get out of the way, and you guys come up here.
I had the good luck to be in the Navy in one of those few periods when we didn't have a war. So I didn't have to go through the horror of combat. I was in the Naval Reserve, and I did my active service from 1957 to 1959, after the Korean War and before the Vietnam War. I was stationed on the first guided missile cruiser. We did our shakedown cruise in the Caribbean, and it was the first time I was out of the country, arriving in Puerto Rico. I was only 18 years old. I didn't even know that Puerto Rico was a colony of the United States. I just thought it was just another one of those Latin American countries. But it soon became clear to me, being stationed in Puerto Rico, that Puerto Rico was a veritable colony of the United States. I was stationed at a fortress, San Cristobal, in Old San Juan, that was run by the U.S. military. And the first night there, I was put on shore patrol in Old San Juan. What is shore patrol? It's a police, a military police. Now, how can a country or a commonwealth or an associated state allow foreign police to police parts of its country? This was just another example of the real nature of colonialism as exemplified in Puerto Rico. I believe that the word terrorism is a word that confuses the issue. Violence organized by nation states is called war, and violence organized by non-governmental groups is called terrorism. Somehow war seems to be more acceptable, and terrorism is not. Now, this conference is about the war policy of the United States. And whether you want to call this policy by any other name, you may. What's the difference between a small group of people called terrorists opening fire on, gunning down innocent civilians in Paris, and the United States bombing and killing innocent civilians in Syria? If you wanted to add up the number of casualties caused by so-called terrorist groups in the last few years, it pales in comparison to the number of casualties that the foreign policy of the United States has resulted in. And this conference, to me, is about the war policy of the United States. And this policy is based upon the building of an empire. Many Americans don't look at our country as an empire. It's hard to use that word. After all, didn't we fight for our independence against the British Empire? Isn't that how we started out? Didn't we issue a warning to Europe called the Monroe Doctrine early in the 19th century not to reestablish its colonies in America after the fall of the Spanish Empire? Aren't empires based upon emperors or monarchs? And aren't we a democracy? How could we be an empire? Didn't we fight 2 world wars to defeat empires in Europe and in Asia? Nevertheless, history tells another story. So-called democracies can venture into empires or imperialism just as well as other forms of government. Athens established colonies throughout the Mediterranean. The Roman Republic had already established an empire before the Roman emperors assumed power. The Third French Republic established an empire throughout Africa, Indochina, and in Syria. The founding of the present so-called democratic commonwealths in New England, the Pilgrims and the Puritans, was immediately accompanied by wars of expansion against the local indigenous, wars that continued throughout the colonial and independence period for the next 300 years, until the indigenous peoples themselves were finally cooped up into reservations or forcibly assimilated. Those of you that are acquainted with the Marine hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, remind us of our imperial wars since independence. During the 19th century, We, at the very beginning of our independence in 1803, we sent a small fleet to defeat the local pasha who held sway in Tunis and Libya because he wanted countries to pay tribute for sailing along his shores. And that was in 1803. And the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 that doubled our territory was made possible by Napoleonic wars in Europe and the French effort to defeat the Haitian Revolution. The War of 1812 was largely fought to defeat the English and the indigenous who in the Great Lakes and in Canada. Going on into the 19th century, Spain was given an ultimatum to sell Florida to the United States or else in 1819. Mexico lost half its territory in that war of 1846 to 1847. The Spanish-American War of 1898 was supposedly fought to enable Cuban independence, but resulted in Cuba becoming a dependency, and Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam becoming full-fledged American colonies without any opportunity of plebiscite or any consultation with the people involved. There was no threat to the United States by the Central Powers of Europe in World War I, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Turkish Empire. And yet we entered that war and emerged as a superpower. And World War II is often cited as, oh, wait a minute, that war was fine. That was the just war. That war was to defeat the empires of Japan and the Nazi Empire. The result of that war made the United States a world superpower. And you know, many Americans are proud that we are a superpower, that we have appointed ourselves as the world policeman. Sometimes it's called American exceptionalism. Why not? Somebody has to do it, and what better than the United States of America, the #1 democracy that could spread democracy and peace throughout the world. Well, I believe that modern imperialism and its wars expose a self-destructive flaw in a system that has to follow this road. But it's a road that leads to its own collapse. What kind of a system needs imperialism and war and yet leads to its own collapse? What do you call that kind of a system? Should we say that word? Capitalism? Now, it's true that there were wars before the emergence of capitalism in the 17th century. There were wars all the way, ever since the emergence of so-called civilization, of the ancient states of Egypt and China and what have you. There were wars. But this conference, I think, wants to examine United States policy and why we have this kind of a policy. And it's my opinion that this policy is just a continuation of maintaining and building an empire. Thank you.
Okay, so we have different points of view, different focuses, different analysis. Our next speaker, Nellie Bailey, has been active, as many of you know, around housing in Harlem for many, many, many years, and also as an anti-war activist, and in fact the biggest and practically the only, I think the only really strong action against the war in Harlem was organized by Nellie Bailey, where some 10,000 people several years ago, many years ago, took part in a march also against these wars of aggression in the Middle East. And so Nellie Bailey also has a radio program on WBAI and also on WHCR on Mondays.
To our audience here, I hope that I can impart a somewhat credible narrative of the U.S. war policy. I have taken copious notes because it is rather complicated with multiple layers, but I believe that there is one common denominator, and that is, as I hope to offer here, a geopolitical analysis of the chaos in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Ukraine, and indeed the globe that centers on the U.S. agenda of full spectrum dominance. And that is using agenda of full spectrum dominance, using its European allies and NATO as proxies to wage war, overthrow legitimate government it doesn't like, regime change agenda, and to encroach on the sovereignty of other nation states with impunity. The Lord of Chaos brazenly asserts its divine right of hegemony. Its military targets primarily today are China and Russia. In May of 2000, the Washington Post published an article titled, "For Pentagon, Asia Moving to Forefront." The article states that, quote, "The Pentagon is looking at Asia as the most likely arena for future military conflict, or at least competition." The article said the U.S. would double its military presence in the region and essentially attempts to, let me just sort of get my thoughts straight here. The article said that the U.S. would double its military presence in the region, and the U.S. would double its military presence in the region and essentially attempt to manage China. There can be no doubt that the U.S. Pentagon has always been the primary resource extraction service for corporate globalization, for capital globalization. Caspian Sea oil and natural gases, rare earth minerals found in Africa, the Libya's oil deposits, Venezuelan oil, just to mention a few. In 2002, President Obama, former National Security Advisor General James Jones, who previously served as the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, was quoted in the U.S. media. Quote, "NATO is developing a special plan to safeguard oil and gas fields in the Caspian Sea region. Our strategic goal is to expand to Eastern Europe and Africa," end of quote. Here's another one from the direct source. Former U.S. Director of National Intelligence Dennis Blair sums up the U.S. new Cold War strategy against Russia that it claims may continue to seek avenues for reasserting power and influence in ways that complicates U.S. interests, and China competes for the same resources the United States needs and is in the process of rapidly modernizing its military. End of quote. NATO serves as a global military ally of the U.S. quest for full spectrum dominance, that is, global domination, along with the shameless backing of the United Nations. The U.S. is now attempting to surround Russia at its own peril and that of the world, and that indeed of its European allies being dragged into conflicts opposed by the citizenry of those countries that we see visibly in demonstrations of mass protests, much bigger than that of the anti-war movement here in the United States that has lost a great deal of its luster under the administration since Barack Obama has been elected as the country's first black president. Barack Obama, not the lesser of the evil, but the more effective evil. And we see this, of course, with Obama's executive order of the National Defense Authorization Act that authorized by executive edict the arrest, detention, and murder of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. The Obama administration is currently deploying missile defense systems in Turkey, Romania, Poland, and on Navy destroyers entering the Black Sea to tighten the military noose around Russia that has the world's largest deposits of natural gas and significant supplies of oil. The U.S. has recently built military bases in Romania and Bulgaria and will soon be adding more in Albania. NATO has expanded eastward into Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, right on Russia's border. If that is not provocation, I don't know what is. Georgia, Ukraine, Sweden, and Finland are also on the list to become members of the Viper NATO. It remains to be seen if the U.S. in partnership with NATO can achieve its objective to neutralize the strategic capabilities of Russia and China. But things do fall apart, and there are unintended consequences. Russia refused to be drawn into a military quagmire in Ukraine, much to the chagrin of Washington. Nor is it likely that the RAND Corporation study that calls for the breakup of Russia into smaller parts in order to give Western corporations better access to the vast resources there in Russia is not achievable. That will never happen. There will be a third world war before that happens, unfortunately. The vicious and bloody balkanization of Yugoslavia, Libya, and Iraq by the U.S. NATO forces will not succeed in Russia. Truth is, its empire here in the United States is in a death spiral. The Lord of Chaos lurches from one bloody disaster to another bloody disaster, reaping the animosity of ruthless, beyond imagination death cults, ironically of its own making. And they're all over the place. As the ice melts in the Arctic due to unprecedented global warming that the U.S. talks about but does nothing about, the Lord of Chaos notes in a Navy report called the U.S. Naval Arctic Roadmap 2014 to 2030 states, quote, ice in the Arctic has been receding faster than we previously thought and offers an increase in activity. It offers a new opportunity. Arctic region holds a plethora of undiscovered fossil fuels and natural resources, including an estimated 90 billion barrels of oil, 1,669 trillion cubic feet of natural gases, and 44 billion barrels of natural gas liquids. The report cautions that the server logistically that serves as that there is in fact a logistical obstacle to distributing the fuel in the region because air and surface platforms are needed. So operating bases are necessary to deploy military personnel. So therefore, the U.S. is looking for a partnership with nations that border the Arctic, and more warships will be needed to ensure the undersea resources are kept in the hands of U.S., NATO, and away from competitors like Russia and China. Yet another reason to isolate Russia. The U.S. pivot in Asia. They now have Navy destroyers in the Asian Pacific region with interceptors on board. They argue to protect against North Korean missile launches. But in reality, the goal is to give the U.S. greater ability to launch preemptive first strike attacks in China. Currently, U.S. military expansions are underway in Hawaii, South Korea, Japan, Guam, Okinawa, Taiwan, Australia, Philippines, and other Pacific nations. And it is indeed a key strategy in this offensive pivot to control China. And who pays for this massively expensive military escalation? None other than the host countries. Maintaining control of the fossil fuel supply while the U.S. economy is collapsing is the key to control of the world's economic engine. For example, China imports about 80% of its oil on ships through the Yellow Sea. Control of that transit route would choke off China's oil supply. Let's talk about the escalation of the war in Syria. The U.S. knows very well that Turkey shot down the Russian jet within Syria airspace. And how do we know this? Because the U.S. has a surveillance project in its space-based infrared system that aims to track all global infrared signatures. It has in operation a remote sensing satellite which travels at 17,000 miles per hour, 430 miles into space, circumnavigating globe, circling the globe every 98 minutes with a 3-foot resolution capacity. And this capacity, utilized at the top of its range, can mean satellites can be read from someone sitting on a bench in Iran through this resolution, although this resolution remains officially unacknowledged. And that was from Brzezinski in 2004, who talked about that. But this is what we are up against. In the October 17th, 2004 issue of the New York Times Sunday magazine, in an article by Ron Suskind, there was an anonymous quote by a high-level U.S. official. Quote, "We are an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality judiciously," as we will, we act again, creating another new reality, which you can study too, and that's how things will sort out. We are history's actors, and you all of you, will be left to just study what we do, end of quote. Creating their own reality in Syria. Britain has now joined France and the U.S. in the U.S.-led airstrikes to defeat ISIS with air power. But the problem is there are more aircrafts than identifiable targets. Russia is in Syria at the invitation of the Assad government and having secured the backing of its government, unlike the U.S. The U.S.-led coalition supposedly conducted 59,015 sorties in Iraq and Syria starting in August of 2014, with only 8,573 having resulted in airstrikes. But this is really, really interesting. But there are credible indications that the vast majority of planes return to their bases without having used their weapons. Is this creating their own reality? Turkish military analyst who writes for, who has a blog on Monitor website reports that although the airstrikes may have been effective against ISIS communications and training facilities, but it added, quote, "It's extraordinary that there is not a single ISIS-controlled facility that has been hit by Allied strikes." Is this again creating their own reality? Given the fact that 2,934 American airstrikes in Syria over the last 14 months have failed to destroy ISIS command and control centers in Raqqa, ISIS combination of conventional guerrilla and terrorist tactics, coupled with public martyrdom as an expression of religious fanaticism, is essential to its ideology for the deployment of its suicide bombers on foot or in vehicles and great numbers to destroy fortifications and to demoralize the enemy, its enemy, the opposition. ISIS has successfully terrified opposition forces by showing videos in which captured Iraq or Syrian soldiers and other combatants are filmed being ritually decapitated or shot in the head or burned alive in a cave. They have deployed its central, nope, I don't want that. It was reported that a family, I'm just going to skip around a bit because my time is nearing it end. But just to give you an example, it has been reported that the family of Syrian soldiers receive phone calls from their son's mobile, their cell phones, with a picture of his body with his severed head on his chest. Mass killings of prisoners occur after all of ISIS victories, whether it's Al-Qaeda affiliates, Al-Nusra Front, they all do the same. No doubt heavy air attacks will increase ISIS losses, and it will find that it is more difficult to bring in foreign fighters through Turkey because most of the borders is now reported closed since the downing of the Russian airplane. But there is a new game afoot, and I just want to quickly refer to this very important article, I think, that was written by a highly regarded geopolitical analyst and journalist, Pepe Escobar, We know that Turkey is the easternmost arm of NATO, and we know that Turkey, the U.S. and NATO supports Turkey. So a case can be made that the U.S. and NATO ultimately supports ISIS because the priority all along was to allow the CIA in the shadows to run a rat line, weaponizing route throughout the territory of Syria. ISIS stolen oil can't flow through Damascus, and we know now through Turkey, because again, these are the unintended consequences that we know for certain, as well as the U.S. has known all along, that Turkey has been the route for ISIS stolen oil. Because we know that the stolen oil can't flow through Damascus-controlled territory, nor through Shiite-dominated Iraq. The oil can't go east to Iran. It's Turkey or nothing. The goal is to control every possible oil asset in Iraq, Kurdistan, and then in liberated Syria. This is the goal of the U.S. Escobar asserts the key reason why Washington always ignores Turkey's array of shady dealings in Syria because of Turkey's fifth column, and that is, in fact, the Turkmen jihadists that is supported by Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. But anyway, to make a long story short, this rat line that has been bombed by Russia has upset the U.S. to no end, because that is the key to smashing the jihadist route through the mountains of Syria. Escobar noted, quote, "The same desperation applies to the Aleppo route, which is also essential for Turkey for all kinds of smuggling. Advanced arms of the 4+1 that we know is Syria, along with its allies Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and the Kurds in Syria, has in fact made significant headway in cutting down ISIS control in the region, and most importantly, its route to deploy its oil along what was once the porous borders of Turkey. And we know, I just want to add, just finally, and I'm going to sum up here, I just want to add something that the American media has ignored, and I believe that Russia has created credible evidence in its satellite photos that have been released in the thousands, that thousands and thousands of trucks with oil leave Syria and go through Turkey, and this is a lucrative revenue for ISIS. It is estimated that it amounts to about $2 million a year, about $2 million a day, and about $500 million a year. So it's important when we look at the geopolitical strategic interests of the U.S. and how it clashes with that of Russia, Iran, and others in the regions who want to see a stable Syria instead of a balkanized state that the U.S. is hoping for, the Lord of Chaos is hoping for, so that once are in fact negotiations, they are able to step in and say, through its proxies on the ground that is falling apart every day, that we will move ahead with regime change, which has always been part of the agenda and has never ceased being part of the agenda. And again, I just want to say that, yep. Okay, all right, I just want to end here. That when we look at the situation in the Middle East and in Syria, Iraq, and the other countries in the region, we have to pull together this picture of full spectrum dominance that the Lord of Chaos are hell-bent on achieving to prop up its collapsing economy, and that can only be achievable through its military might and control of the oil resources of the world. And that is what we are facing, and that is what we must understand.
And indeed, there are many other points, and we could go through them also in the question and answer section. I met Alan Stolzer well over a decade ago through the anti-war coalitions, through the anti-war marches and so on. But I didn't know one aspect about Alan, and that is he is also part of an organization called Military Initiative, which does work with military men, with veterans. Alan himself is a Navy veteran. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sisters and brothers. My name is Alan Stolzer. I am the Outreach Coordinator for Military Initiative and a Navy vet. A brief point about my service. I served in the Navy from 1961 through 1963, and the most important thing I took out about it was meeting people from all over the country, truck drivers, steel workers, farmers, people I probably wouldn't have met in New York. And in this process, I found out that New York City was not the center of the universe. And then later on, when I went out on my own, I worked my way around Western Europe for 3.5 years, shipped out, did a bunch of things. I found out the United States was not the center of the universe either. So much for my comments at this point about U.S. imperialism. As far as military initiative is concerned, we have been in existence for 13 years. Originally, we were the military project, and then we became military resistance. What our chief goal and aim is to outreach to troops, those in the Army, those in the National Guard, the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, wherever we find them. And that's exactly what we've been doing. And we have material back on the table against the war, which you can consult. Because one of the most important and relevant things that we tried to undertake was the memory that most of us who have passed through Vietnam is that the troops ended the war in Vietnam. Not Henry Kissinger, not anybody else. It was the troops. On that table is a printout from a Pentagon colonel named Heinel, who in 1971 reported that the Army was in total disarray. It was in rebellion, or it was on drugs, or whatever the case. In other words, it was no longer a fighting force. If you don't have a fighting force as an army, I don't care how big it is, you're not going to win. Now, it's true they bombed in 72 and 73, but there was sabotage conducted in 1972 and 1973, and guess who did it? The Army. It wasn't the brass, not the Army, I should say the enlisted people. And one of the interesting features about the GI Rebellion, which included 700 fraggings. In case you don't know what a fragging is, a fragmentation grenade, or the element of one, or one that was not triggered, was left on the cot of an NCO or an officer who was leading the men to danger or was ordering them around unnecessarily. That was a warning. If that warning wasn't understood, wasn't complied with, that officer or NCO was dealt with in violence. I am not representing that necessarily. I am saying this was the effect that the war had. There was all kinds of actions in Vietnam, all kinds. What we started doing then was trying to, outreach to the troops. A lot of that was done during the Vietnam era, but there didn't seem to be very much being done from 2003 on. So we kind of took up that cudgel. One of the main aspects of our activity has been is the now closed armory on 142nd Street and Fifth Avenue, a National Guard armory. We had connections inside. We endeavored to find out who was there, and we would go every time they had a drill, usually on the weekends, usually on a Saturday, usually around 6 a.m. And we bring our material in, only our material. Other people were invited to come, but it was understood this was our domain. And we brought our own printed material, we brought DVDs, we brought cookies, we brought all kinds of stuff. And we had some very, very interesting experiences. One of the experiences, this was approximately 2004, an E7, there are 9 pay grades in the military, E1 through E9. E1, the least pay, E9, the highest pay. A big, tall sergeant. We had given him some material. He turned around and came back at us. I said, well, here it goes. You know, we're really going to have enough. And he went into a diatribe about Bush you wouldn't believe. You wouldn't believe it. Another incident was a middle-aged soldier, a gray-haired woman, was leaving the armory. We were almost finished. We had maybe 15, 20, 25 newsletters left. Usually there was anywhere between 75 and 100 troops. And she chatted us up, and she said, how much stuff you got left? And we said, well, you got I'll take it, thank you. And she started passing it around to everybody. And then another interesting incident was this. The CO of the armory, there were various ones during the time we were outreaching there, but this particular CO engaged us. And he said to us, you've got more allies in there than you think. So naturally, we proceeded with that. And we are continuing to proceed. To bring you up to date, several things are happening now. We have material back there concerning a unit or 38 units in Greece, including more than 50 soldiers who are now at this moment agitating against their government for the government's conduct against refugees. They have sworn, and we have their names there, sworn to represent those refugees as best as they can and not to victimize them. That's another thing that's going on. And this is the kind of thing that we endorse. Also, there is another a base that we're about to approach. And I say this inviting anybody who wants to join us can sign up. They can sign up for our newsletter back there. You can chat me up. You can talk about anything you want. And I will leave you with one last incident which happened yesterday. I approached a couple of National Guard troops, handing out material, got to talking to them, and I asked one of them, are you being deployed? Well, very often these guys go to Afghanistan and other places, and we tell you the reason we're here, we oppose the wars. What you do with your own mind is your own business, but we don't want to see you guys getting chewed up by a bunch of politicians. That's why we're here. And this young man told me he was being deployed to Guantanamo. I said, well, what do you know about that? Here's some material. The DVDs you see there, I gave him and his partner one each. I gave them a couple of copies of our newsletter and the issues about Greece, which we are going to distribute liberally from here on in, which that is exactly the kind of a thing that we're about. These people are the same as we are. That's what I learned when I joined the Navy. They may wear uniforms, but they're the same as we are, and they need support. We're not going to organize them. They may organize us someday. But if you want to end the war, you've got to have a tool to do it. You can have all the conferences, all the demonstrations you want, but the point is to end it. And they are the implement. They are the weapon to do so. Thank you.
As a brief introduction, you know, back in the 1960s, 70s, whenever students took over a building, and we took over Borough of Manhattan Community College and City College, and George is here, I think took part in the taking over of Columbia University and so on and so forth. You would take over a church and the media would be there. They would cover you, and that would help the movement grow. They learned a lot from those errors on their part. That is, today they censor totally any actions students carry out. As a result, many of us think that there's nothing going on in the university. Percy Lujan is part of the Revolutionary Student Coordinating Committee. These students are very, very active, but we're in 2015, so there's total censorship, and most of us don't know anything about it. They were very active recently against the fact that General Petraeus got a position with Hunter College, I believe it was, as a result of their protests. That contract is, I believe it's been terminated, right? Or it was not, well, we could go into that. In any case, they took part in very large demonstrations organized basically by them and some other students in a coalition that we're part of. Last 2 Tuesdays ago, I took part in a demonstration that they organized. There were some 40 students in front of 26 Federal Plaza in support of Syrian immigrants into this country. I was the oldest guy there, everybody else was a student, but the media didn't cover it at all. I could go on and on regarding their struggle over at City College against the closing of the Morales Assata Shakur Center. They were in the vanguard of that also. Incidentally, regarding the anti-General Petraeus activities, protests, a whole bunch of their students, members of the Revolutionary Student Coordinating Committee, were arrested. But again, nothing comes out into the media, but there is a very powerful, very clear politically student organization in New York City, and Percy Lujan is part of it.
Good afternoon, comrades. As Daniel said, I'm Percy Lujan, member chair of the Revolutionary Student Coordinating Committee. We are an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, proletarian feminist organization. We started out in 2012 as a consequence of the 2011 tuition hikes in CUNY. There was a split in the student movement in CUNY between an economistic demand for a CUNY that was just merely free and some students that wanted actual control of the university, actually community control of the university, and that was us. And the revolutionaries came on to form RSCC, Revolutionary Student Coordinating Committee, or RISC for short. Like what we see, right, is actually the United States is like the biggest imperialist power in the world, but it's not the only imperialist power in the world. It's actually, it's coming into conflict with rising imperialist powers, namely Russia and China and others. So now I think like what's happening is that we see that the United States is preparing for an inter-imperialist conflict. And the way it does that is that it militarizes its society in order to start in preparation for war, essentially. The way we see that in CUNY played out in CUNY as far as is the now on 2013, early summer of 2013, we heard that CUNY was going to hire David Petraeus. As you know, David Petraeus is former CIA director, main commander of the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, a war criminal responsible for the deaths of thousands in Fallujah, like when they drop white phosphorus on civilian population, and now you see the consequences in many children being born with malformations, as well as other operations in Central America. So RSCC heard about this, and we put together a ad hoc committee where we called different groups around campus, and we named it the Hot Committee Against the Militarization in CUNY. Not only was David Petraeus going to be teaching in CUNY, not in Hunter, but in Macaulay Honors, which is right down Central Park. It's the Honors College. He was going to be teaching like the honors class. It's going to be a very exclusive seminar that you had to apply for. But also the university was bringing back ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Corps, after 40 years of having been kicked out of the university. Actually, ROTC was kicked out in the 70s due to massive student protests. So basically, they disrupted the ROTC recruitment, and ROTC was forced out of the university. But now it was being brought back. So we formed the ad hoc committee, and we began our actions. The first action was disrupting an informational session that the ROTC had called inside the CUNY Central. So we went in there just pretending we were, normal students trying to join the ROTC, and then we began asking questions to the ROTC recruitment officers. He coincidentally, like the recruitment officer was this black guy, and he would talk about his story, as a minority, being born into the military. And this is something that this is not like a coincidence. There was actually a memorandum, it's basically written by some military apparatus. Basically, they talking about how they actually intend to go into CUNY in order to the ROTC. It would intend for the ROTC going to CUNY in order to increase the pool of officers that are from minority backgrounds, in order to facilitate that imperialist expansion of the United States, using our own people to serve their imperialist interest. That's how. And when it came down to, so we disrupted that ROTC meeting. ROTC people didn't like that much, so they kicked us out. But later we found out where Petreo's class was. It was on a Monday. So on his first class, we went and we picketed with about 200 people in front of the Macaulay Honors. And it lasted for about 2 hours of protesting. When we, thank you. Hold on, you might want to hear what happened next. After the protest, we disarmed, we dispersed. A couple of comrades just stayed behind, just chilling. All of a sudden, we see these, little broad white guy, professor-looking guy, coming out of the Macaulay Honors, and one of our comrades said, "Hey, that looks like Petreos." "Oh, damn, that's Petreos." So we call everybody. It was about 30 people at that point. As he was walking down Central Park West, walking to his car, we surrounded him and began shouting, you imperialists, get the hell out of CUNY, we want you out. So basically, it actually, and that's, I don't know if you heard the phrase, but that's when every class David came out. So there is actually a video, if you look in YouTube, where you type RSC, there is actually a video of us chasing Petreos for 4 blocks down the street. And he actually had to jaywalk out in order to avoid us. And he went into his car. We quickly surrounded him, he speed out, and that was actually one of the key moments of the anti-militarization campaign. Once that video hit the web, it went viral. We saw people, the first reaction is from the reactionary media and Fox News going how could you, be going at this war hero, you should not be why are you doing that? Macaulay Honor saying, well, that he has academic freedom, to express whatever he wants, to teach imperialist ideology or whatever. So we he's actually like the seminar was nothing really about military science or anything. His seminar was actually about, it was the seminar was actually called the rise of the North American age. Can U.S. bring back? No, are we at the verge of a new North American age? Something. So basically, it was basically a seminar talking about what policies could the country implement in order to continue being an imperialist power. that was the seminar about, and he went about fracking. He's actually being paid as a consultant for a fracking company. So that's why he was actually being. So. Going back to the video, like the video went out, and it actually polarized the issue, right? It was what we intended, polarizing the issue in between the fact that we have an imperialist on our campus, a war criminal, and he's being being welcome to teach. At the same time, students, the tuition is rising, and they bringing back ROTC. So we saw this as a trend, for militarization CUNY. So it got talked about. It got us a lot of support. As much hate as it got us, also we had comrades from overseas hitting us up, from Afghanistan, other countries in the Middle East, saying, "Thank you, you are doing it right." So, this guy's a war criminal. You did the right thing. The next week, we protested him again. This time, much more security team was complicated. It closed 5 blocks. We still tried to chase. Like they actually parked a car right in front of the school, so they could get him out. And a whole security operation was deployed. We still tried to chase the van, but obviously limited because of the barricades and everything. The next day there was an actual fundraiser for him, in the Macaulay Honors College, where we had more. There were other. Imperialist Paulis Zakaria was going to be there. I think Colin Powell was going to be there as well. So all this is what we saw is a way of CUNY positioning itself. We are going to we're going to continue allowing U.S. imperialist interest, U.S. military interest into the university. When we saw we began our picket line in the campus around in front of the school. All of a sudden, the public safety of CUNY had called NYPD as well, and one of the white shirts of the NYPD began shoving one of our comrades. My comrade tried, getting out of his way. All of a sudden, the NYPD pig grabs him, glancing into the car. That's what we all throw ourselves. It was a very, confused, very chaotic incident. But we saw basically, a very an unseen level of brutality that day. We see comrades getting, slammed against cars, being hit in the head. Others, while in the ground, handcuffed, they're being punched in the kidneys. One of our comrades was slammed her head was slammed in the ground. And 6 of my comrades got arrested that day. Actually, 5 of them were RSCC members. 1 became an RSCC member later on, but they were. What we saw, it was a targeted attack against the organizers of the anti-militarization committee and the anti-militarization campaign in CUNY. With that, actually, that's when CUNY showed its teeth. There's actually videos of this online in the YouTube page and everywhere. There's actually when we saw is actually CUNY show its teeth. Actually, we think of the university as this just open forum with correct ideas. where all sorts of ideas can be debated and analyzed. What we see is actually the university is far from that, but the university serves as an ideological apparatus of the ruling class of the society. So once you confront that apparatus for what it is, the apparatus will show its teeth and repress you. That didn't deter those 6 arrests. They became known as the CUNY 6 after that. Those 6 arrests didn't deter the anti-militarization. We continue picketing David Petraeus. So this goes back to the other part of the fall 2013. This all happened, between in a month. We were all organizing out of this center in City College called the Morales Shakur Center, Community Center. It had been a center for 20 years, serving the community of City College and students. A lot of the organizing against the militarization clinic came out of there. We were going to go on October 20th, I believe. We were going to go on a meeting. David Zucker, who is a former member of SLAM, Student Liberation Action Movement, also a CUNY, came there early, and he saw that the Morales Shakur Center, there were toy cops from public safety guarding it. And they were removing all the stuff from the center had been removed. He sat in front of there, and then he was brutalized by public safety. He was removed in a gurney, taken to the hospital after that. But he had the opportunity to let us know that they have closed down the Morales Shakur Center. So we came down that day, and we surrounded. They completely locked down the NAC building, which is in City College, the North American Center, North Academic Center, and they closed down the library during midterms. This is October 20 midterms, and so people could not get in, nobody could get out of city. We began, we gathered a couple of people. After an hour, they let people into the library, but they didn't let people inside the center. After that, the movement developed into the actual, Liberate CUNY campaign, which pretty much was about returning the Morales Shakur Center, and removing, as well as the anti-militarization demands against the ROTC and the hiring of David Petraeus. The closing down of Morales Shakur Center sparked a series of protests in City College, different actions. One of which, taking over buildings, walkouts. Because of that, the college suspended 2 of my comrades and threw criminal charges against them. So we had to fight, those criminal charges, plus the additional 6 charges against our comrades because of the arrest during the protest against Petraeus. That was the highlight of that anti-militarization movement. Because of that, we had to go in retreat, our organization, because of the we sustained very heavy losses because of that. But we learned lessons, right? We learned lessons from there. And now we're moving forward after 2 years of building. But when it comes down to the militarization in CUNY and the struggle for that, is that we haven't given up, but David Petraeus still teaches in Macaulay. Now he has been moved out of the Macaulay building to another building, more secluded, like near actually John Jay, where he's in a tower, and that's where he has classes. Now the ROTC is still in some colleges. A lot of it is operating out of City College. That's where their main office is. It was actually trying to be implemented in Medgar Evers and CSI, College of Staten Island, but because of opposition by the faculty and the students there, they actually backed away. But ROTC continues trying to expand to other campuses. What we see is now, there's an incipient student movement against militarization. And not only, but out of that, against militarization of our university. What we see is that they want to come in there. They have different, there are two visions to the university that they want to promote, right? At the same time, they closed down the Morales Shakur Center. It was named about after Guillermo Morales, who's a Puerto Rican nationalist leader, and Assad Shakur, Black Liberation Army, Black Panthers. Both are exiled in Cuba now. And at the same time they closed down the center, they renamed the entire humanities school of city, the Colin Powell School for Civic Engagement. So it just shows like the kind of perspective, like the kind of agenda CUNY wants to push on its mostly Black and Latino population. One being the Asada, they don't want us to serve our people, they don't want that anti-imperialist sentiment to grow out of our population, because in reality they see us as an internal colony and as an enemy population that they need to control, and they promote individuals and organizations that actually integrate and serve the imperialist interests, like Colin Powell, like Condoleezza Rice. And that is the ideological fight that has been waging in CUNY. And little by little, we are starting to, learn from our mistakes, learn how to more effectively fight the ROTC, the presence of ROTC, the presence of militarization in CUNY. At the same time, we want the support of the community, and we want the support of organizations that are committed to against the militarization of our society. Thank you.
We will now go on to hopefully questions and any comments.
When you have an imperialist war, that's when you have the seeds for a revolution. I'm talking about what happened in 1917. That's exactly what happened. If you saw the movie Reds, it shows you the soldiers coming back from the front lines, defeated, and the new guys were coming in, and they told them, stop, don't go there. The Germans are not your enemies. So that's the way to go. I want to say the problem is today we have this volunteer army. That's why I personally think it's good to have a army like we had before that, a recruiting army, because then you have working class people, average people, who are dragged out of their life into this thing, and they were able to see what's going on with the war situation. And Nellie, thank you. It was great what you said. And the first brother, what you said, very interesting things. I thought about what you were saying. And of course, the comrade from the college. You're the future. You have to hold up. It's your generation now that has to hold up the torch for social change.
The revolts and the rebellions that were conducted in Vietnam and away from Vietnam in the military were done by enlistees for the most part, not by draftees, enlistees, which is surprising, one would think, because they felt they had been betrayed, and they responded in kind. So that's a fact that I think should be elaborated on.
My brother was in Vietnam, and he was drafted, and I come from a very small southern black town, and a number of draftees from my community and throughout the South were part of what my brother says was what the military had described as the moron squad, and these were young working class black men who were put on the front line and just who were killed in tremendous numbers. He also talked about the fragging that went on, and that drugs was just a part of everyday life, and that once they realized what was going on and the lies that they were told, that they had no intention of fighting, nor to be led into a high casualty venture or assignment by what he said, some idiotic captain or superior officer who were often, according to my brother, white and from the South.
When wandering around Google land, I noticed a couple very interesting things that raised my eyebrows. One was the mob threatened ISIS, which I thought was interesting. They said don't hit any port cities where we could, like any like Baltimore's port, any port where there's a lot of ports. The other thing I noticed was Anonymous, the hackers collective, has threatened ISIS. And when I read that, I said, wouldn't Anonymous hacking ISIS's website, messing up their computer system, meaning they could not recruit anybody, would that kill and cripple ISIS more than any U.S. and NATO combined, Russian combined military could do? So, food for thought.
The comments concerning the military may refocus on issues apart from that of imperial war. Army Times reported the majority of its subscribers, who tend to be officers and higher ranking enlisted, were opposed to sending any further troops to Iraq, or continuing the war in Afghanistan, or sending any troops to Syria. But the issues within the armed forces extend far beyond the issues of a few thousand troops in the Middle East, and that's what there are. Not that they should be there. It's important, perhaps, to remember that there is no great gulf between people who serve in the armed forces and us, in terms of opinions, views, and the presence there of people who are radicalized by real events. To finish it up, a few months ago, when Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party, if you go to Google and Google in Guardian plus British generals mutiny, you will find the Guardian in England reported that the leadership of the British Army had told reporters that if Corbyn was actually elected, they might find it necessary to intervene and find a different person to lead the British government under the recommendations and advice of the British General Staff. Again, this was not some weird conspiracy nut babbling on the internet. This was the Guardian newspaper. You can check it out. England? Of course, such a thing could never happen here, could it? So, one can't say with 100% assurance that such a thing would happen here. But it might be time to start making links between our movements and members of the armed forces who are concerned with the whole range of issues, and who we would not wish to support some general who decided he didn't like the results of an election here, or a group of them. So I encourage you, please, to check out the work we're trying to do and give serious thought to participating. Thank you.
Julia Willebrand from the Green Party. I haven't heard, or nor have you seen anything much in the press about if there was any serious work by the U.S., in fact, and its allies to do something about ISIS. It would be a piece of cake, frankly, for the international banking cartel to shut them down tomorrow. They've got thousands and thousands of troops. Somebody is paying for the troops to eat and this and that. Someone is paying for all of the weapons that they're using, et cetera, and the internet and the social media piece of it. And it's obvious that all of it is going through the international banking cartel. Now, presumably, the President of the United States could talk to the Bernanke and the rest of them and shut them down tomorrow. The activists that want to do something about the war should add that piece of the argument into the argument, as opposed to all the wonderful things that were suggested here today, but that one isn't being mentioned anywhere. If you do searches, the press doesn't ever cover it. It's as if it doesn't exist. And it's so obvious when you talk, Nellie's citing numbers, right? Billions. So anyway, that's my suggestion for the day.
The imperialist powers prepare the population in advance for a major inter-imperialist conflict. What other examples of that do you think we could see now transpiring around us, besides just the ROTC going into the schools?
That's a very good question. I think that in any case, I think that the United States has propped up its military apparatus as well as its security, its repressive apparatus, in order to suppress population and popular dissent. When it comes down I think they have learned how to deal with internal colonies better. When it comes down to Black Lives Matter movement, right? The rising discontent, the way black people and other populations face genocide at the hands of the white supremacist state. It began growing as a protest grew, as the protest began solidifying. We saw a very a certain level of repression that you haven't seen in other demonstrations, because this is what actually, because I guess the United States knows that as far as because a Black Lives Matter movement could turn into a Black Liberation movement, and they know that if they don't suppress it fast, they could have another 1960 situation in there. That's what I'll say is part of its way of it's militarizing society. It's making sure that all these populations are afraid and they fall in line with their own with their plans, as well as trying to recruit from among them. So like some of them could see a way out of their of the oppression through serving imperialist interests of the United States.
Can you recommend any books, media, reading lists, DVDs along the lines of the public waking up? One that comes to mind is Killing Hope by William Blum, that I remember Osama bin Laden said would be a good idea if the American people discovered, or Confessions of an Economic Hitman, Perkins. Is there reading lists or film list that you could recommend?
I would recommend books that were written by Noam Chomsky and Zinn, especially on American history. Naomi Klein's Disaster Capitalism. Nellie Bailey and Julia brought out a very good point that does the United States really want to defeat ISIS or any other so-called terrorist group? Or is it that the United States wants to have just a constant war in order to shore up our economy and maintain its power throughout the world? And once people begin to realize that, they've taken a huge step forward in opposing this kind of a policy. What comes to mind when I was going over the history of United States policy, when I was in Argentina, one of the things I noticed that there were almost no black people in Argentina, and yet I knew from my studies of Latin American history that there was a black population in Argentina at one time. So what happened to them? Well, in the wars of right after independence, there was some bloody wars between Argentina and Paraguay, and the Argentine government recruited the blacks and put them on the front lines and decimated the black population. And many of the remaining blacks just emigrated someplace else. So that's another aspect of our war policy. It's the poor people, working class people, people of color that suffer the most from these wars, and yet they're the ones that are asked to fight them.
I would recommend the recent book by Gerald Horne. For the life of me, I can't think of it, but you can Google his name. He's a black historian that has written just 20 or more books. Just in terms of a day-to-day update, I would certainly suggest the weekly Black Agenda Report online that comes out on Wednesdays, and Black Agenda Radio that I co-host with Glenn Ford. I would also recommend Asia Time Online, where you'll get the best of Pepe Escobar, and then of course everybody knows about the other stuff, Alternet and stuff like that. There is one other, just in terms of black media and its coverage, because one doesn't get the impression that foreign geopolitical analysis are offered by black publications. That's not the true. There's the Black Star that Milton Amamati does. They have fantastic stuff on Boko Haram, which is an ISIS affiliate. So just be open and definitely go beyond the corporate media here. I mean, it's just amazing that given all of the information that has been revealed in Turkey, including the arrest of the 2 journalists, including the accusations against the president of Turkey and his family, been involved in this multi-million-dollar, really billion-dollar theft of oil that goes through Turkey, that the U.S. media has virtually ignored this, and it's incumbent on us to be educated and to reach out beyond this kind of status quo of news reporting here in the U.S.
I would heartily recommend the 3-volume work or 3-part work by Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp, he has a 3-part book on politics of nonviolent action, but I must add that there are limitations, and well, the one gist of the argument is that contrary to the foundations of Marxist thinking, most of power rests in people who obey orders, not just give orders. So if you refuse to obey orders, you have the potential to topple whoever, including guys like Stalin. Of course, this is not risk-free. You can you lose your head, and hundreds of thousands of people like you can lose your heads. But you can't say that you don't have the potential. Now, limitation is that his focus is mostly on human power. And as somebody who is at least cognizant of millions of other species and forces that are, let's say, non-human, I must add that we have to be cognizant of our powerlessness also, and I emphasized this at the beginning. Yes, we do have the power to topple anybody, but we are also collectively powerless against certain forces. And this has to be part of our message for the urgency of the need to organize, because we are not prepared for non-human threats, not properly. The book is, versions of it are available online, at least. He lists 198 methods of nonviolent action, in addition to all the violent things you can do, which is useful to go to. But I must say that most of this is based on historical examples. He makes the point that he didn't invent any of this. This goes back to Roman times, if not before. But what we face is a global issue, or several global issues, and we have to organize globally, and there are no examples of that. So you can't study this from books and DVDs and whatever. We have to create certain things. We have to act as if we are potential members of a global community. For this, there is no blueprint. You can waste a lot of time learning. As Stoic philosophers would tell you, learning can be a good waste of time, whatever. So there is much that we have to invent as we, cook, freshly in the kitchen.
My name is Ann Egan. I'm with the Green Party. I'm really amazed at the information we've gotten today. My head is spinning. But there's something we haven't mentioned, our biggest problem. This militarization adds to it. Our economic system is the global warming. Even if we organize everything and everybody on this earth, we may not have an earth to keep it on after we create this wonderful society we're talking about. So let us not forget the global warming. And I was really upset when a lot of my friends told me they were going to Paris. And I said, why are you going to Paris? You think Obama's going to sit with you or something? No, they were going over there. I don't know why. Come on, every time we go across that ocean, or go to California for that matter, we really burn up, or we get out in a car and go to Jersey. So let's not forget the global warming, okay? Thank you.
Wait, no, because we're okay, very quickly.
I just learned last night the number one greatest consumer of fossil fuel is the U.S. military.
We wanted to go, the thing is, it's going on video, so we really want it to be heard.
I just wanted to introduce, I'm a new Manhattan Green Party member, Dennis Levy, and I'm a self-identified black man. I look like a Puerto Rican, but I got a Jewish name, Levy. Growing up was hell, okay? Whenever I would come out, somebody would always holler, hey, get him. He's all of them, niggas, big and Jew, all right? But hey, anyway, I'm also president of the New York State Committee to Legalize Marijuana. And maybe you guys don't think it, but there are a lot of revolutionaries that are in the cannabis movement, okay? I'm not talking about those that have been taken over by the corporate world. I'm talking about those that are grassroots, that see the connection to weather change, that understand that hemp is the future of our economy in the world, and that we have a lot of people that are a part of Black Lives Matter, that are part of a lot of the movements around the world, globally. So I hope that I can get involved with the Manhattan Greens and bring in more people that are also on the front line of the legalized cannabis movement. And we can use that group to help energize our group. All right? Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Bonnie. I do a lot of blogging and tweeting, and I want to thank you guys. I'm going to spread the information. This was a terrific collection. It's nice to be back among the Greens again. I wanted to make 3 points. First of all, just to put it in words, we really need a paradigm shift from patriarchy that believes in might makes right, power, control, money, to a humanism paradigm of cooperation, partnership, and empathy. We're in post-morality Obama world, and we really have to wake up. One of my biggest pet peeves is the mainstream media and how information like this is not getting through to people. And I guess I want to ask the panel, do you have recommendations? You know, I feel like our arms are too short to fight corporate mainstream media. I blog, and every day, every week, I dutifully go to Black Agenda Report, I go to Information Clearinghouse, I go to Counterpunch, I go to WSWS, I try to get as much information as I can, and then I tweet and blog about it, and I'm called a conspiracy theorist. I'm called a paranoid. You know, I go on The Guardian to comment, and every other comment I make is censored, and they won't print it, especially if I go after what Israel is doing. That's like, you know, that immediately brings up stuff for me. So, so I really, you know, I'm really frustrated. Even like I promote Jill Stein. Well, how come I haven't heard about Jill Stein? Well, Jill Stein is against corporate funding, so you're not going to see her on corporate media. I mean, they do such an amazing job. I mean, she gets arrested, and she can't get any, you know, any attention and stuff. So we really do need to organize. We really need to do the grassroots, you know, push back again. I'm about to go west to see my family, and I was never the radical in the family until the last 2 decades, and now I'm the radical, and I know I'm gonna have to, you know, defend myself and either shut up or really tell people, you know, what I think, and then, and it's, well, I do, but it's amazing that they have no clue. Like, where are you getting your information? It's like, it's out there, but you're not getting it because you're watching MSNBC. They don't watch Fox, they watch MSNBC, and we really do have to, you know, get it out that both political parties are evil. I mean, you know, binary thinking or whatever, they're evil. Thanks.
Reynolds, and then Paul, and then George, and then we are going to be kicked out of here in 16 minutes. So before we get there, I do want to say this. I think most of the people here are against the wars, right? Okay. And in case there's a person that is not, we're glad you're present also in any case. But this is the deal. I think we have the contact information of everybody here. If you're interested in reviving the anti-war movement, if you're interested in taking part, probably in February or March, in some demonstration here in New York City, probably in Manhattan, against the war, we will appreciate your participation in a forthcoming meeting sometime after Christmas. We're going to invite everybody here. We're going to invite people that are not here. We have to revive the anti-war movement. As we know, after Obama got into the presidency, the people who took over what was once known as the New York City, which Nellie Bailey, George, Stolzer, a lot of the people here were involved in that. coalition. It was called New York City Coalition for Peace and Justice. It was taken over by a bunch of Democrats. They've destroyed the anti-war movement, but hopefully with new blood coming in, students, younger people, and working class, we can revive the anti-war movement. So we're going to invite everybody here for a meeting sometime in January, and hopefully we could revive this anti-war sentiment and take it to the streets. John.
Hi, I'm John Reynolds. I want to thank all the organizers and participants in the forum and all the attendees for this wonderful forum to oppose the imperialist wars of Washington and the other imperialist countries. I just want to say a couple of things. I don't know if it was mentioned, but on the day after the Paris attacks, the stocks of the major arms manufacturers shot up. They said it was like a rocket taking off on the stock market. So the first question I want to leave you with is how do we end these wars when there are fantastic profits to be made on the capital markets of the world, right here in New York particularly, and everywhere. So we have to link this to Wall Street, the banks, and profits. That's one thing. And the other thing is, we were talking about climate change, fossil fuels, and, well, the Middle East, one of the largest reserves of fossil fuels in the world, and Africa. So I think the link needs to be made. I think it's pretty obvious that these are wars to protect and to control oil and fossil fuels. Just want to leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.
Paul, George, and then Julia.
Hi, my name is Paul Gilman. I'm here also in the New York State Committee to Legalize Marijuana, and I'm also, which has already made its introduction. Thank you, Dennis. I'm also with SOA Watch, and we're talking about the imperialist wars against Latin America. This thing in Syria is not even new. They've been doing it all around. And we're talking about resource extraction right now in El Salvador. They're taking huge amounts of gold and making these giant pits of sulfuric acid in which they use to separate the ore from the dirt, and then creating entire environmental disasters. And you know, they're training the actual troops in these countries to keep this system going. That's poisoning the people. And I'd also want to continue, I'm also with the New York State Committee to Legalize Marijuana. I want to talk about the drug war. Is it the war on us? It's the war on black and brown people and poor whites. And that's their solution to everything, is just to, you know, create a hysteria, because there was no real need to go after these drug addicts like they did in the 1920s. There's a police-created hysteria, just like ISIS is an internationally CIA-created hysteria. And when they want to target a people, they create these hysterias, then they go after them, and next thing you know, we have huge levels of mass incarceration locally and internationally. We have all this violence with blowing people up and everything. They create, as Nellie said, lords of chaos, creating chaos in the inner city instead of building it. You know, the Iran-Contra, they're bringing cocaine in there on one hand and then busting the same people on the other hand and supplying them guns, and next thing you know, it's this huge, horrible mess, and there's no way out of it through capitalism. And so, you know, we're trying, I don't know, well, right now we're trying to legalize hemp for fuel and economic opportunities for people, but I don't know, we got to do more than that.
George.
And medical use.
And in case you don't know, there's a company in New York State that's already been given a contract to grow pot legally. It's a construction company. It's a construction company. So they've been, George, come on. I'm waiting for George to come over here. This company has, I think for what, over 20 years, 30 years, they've been building, how many? 90 years been building highways, so they got the contacts with the government, when you would think that if there's anybody going to be growing marijuana for medical purposes, it would be perhaps unemployed people or whatever, or people like me who have very low income, or I don't know.
First, I really think this panel was excellent in giving an overview of different aspects of what we used to talk about as a war abroad. And one of the things I would like to add is that we need to tie in together the wars abroad and the war at home. There's attacks on working people all over the country. There's various forms of austerity. There's cutbacks in food stamps. There's privatization of the schools, of the post office, and so forth. And for most working people who are thinking about, living paycheck to paycheck, we need to identify their problems with the wars abroad, okay? One of the most important things of that is that we have the same enemy, which I would identify as a monopoly capitalist ruling class that is oppressing working people here as well as oppressed peoples abroad. I do also want to add to what Danny said about reviving the anti-war movement. I'm very much in agreement with that. The only thing I think is that we need to do it in the form of a coalition, or what used to also be called a united front. That is, that we try and bring in as many different groups and individuals in the city and all over the country, and obviously also all over the world, in forming united actions against the war.
Okay, Julia, and then Willie, and we only have 5 minutes left. Yes, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I just want to make a suggestion. I'm sure that everybody in this room has more than enough to do, but just in case you have some room in your schedule, I'm also an active member of Occupy, and Occupy exists despite what the national press and all the press say it's dead. Ain't true. It meets every single Sunday, the one in New York, the Alternative Banking Group. They meet up at Columbia in the School of International Affairs, and what we say is we meet every single Sunday except if Christmas and Yom Kippur fall on Sunday. So literally, and we have a website, alternativebanking.net, but you will meet and talk to people that are focusing on the 1%. Because whenever we talk about who's responsible for this war, we know that ultimately it's the 1% who else benefits from it in the end? Who else does fine with that stock jolt that we just had and so forth? So the Alternative Banking Group of Occupy, Sunday afternoon, the School of International Affairs at Columbia. The website is altbanking, A-L-T, banking, one word, lowercase, .net.
Willie.
Hello, everybody. I want to say something related to the war. It's easy to be against the war, but war also create a lot of problems behind that, because besides the war that kill innocent people, create economic austerities, create environment degradation, increase U.S. imperialism, it creates problem with colonialism, austerity, and it's a long way to go, because there are many people that oppose the war, but war is tied to different issues that involve race, class, imperialism. And now the new year approaching, we're going to feel more challenges. Right now, look the situation in Puerto Rico. It's a case of colonialism, but the case of colonialism is tied to imperialism. And all this is acts of war that take different forms. It's against the people here and abroad.
And now we have 5 minutes left, so 5 people, it'll be 1 minute each. Oh, Manuel, okay, come over here, Manuel. Okay, I just wanted to say regarding what Willie has said regarding Puerto Rico, next Saturday and Sunday, there are leaders of the Electrical Workers Union in Puerto Rico, the people that generate and distribute the electricity in Puerto Rico. The president of that union is coming to New York City, also the president of the Teachers Federation, and other people, and there'll be a very important forum held on 121st Street between Lexington and 3rd Avenue at next Saturday at about 6:30 p.m. So we invite you to take part in that. It's going to be bilingual. Again, 121st Street between Casa Casabe, between Lexington and 3rd Avenue. And Manuel.
We have to continue using the term 1%. It hasn't been used for quite a while, and I think that really sparked a lot of activism with Occupy Wall Street. Let's try to continue using the 1%. Number two, let's not forget the mothers and the women and the mothers whose children have to go to war, etc. How do we appeal to them? How do we get them to our side? I think that's very important. And also, the other thing is the big pharma and single payer. I understand that medications are going to go up and up a lot this year. This is what I heard and read. Anyway, that's it.
Okay, I want to thank everybody. Everybody's been so patient, and we really got to get out here at 4 p.m. I'm so sorry. And so 1 minute for each person, hopefully.
Not much I can do in 1 minute except to say that I spent more than 35 years so far working on issues like this. If I'm given any time, I would like to donate more of my time. And I hope that some of us can transcend electoral issues, electoral politics, and national politics. The issues are truly global. Thank you.
Despite the grand plan of the Lord of Chaos, there are unintended consequences. As Julia has pointed out, if they want to shut down the operation of ISIS, they can do so because those millions of dollars every day flows into the banks. The U.S. has a infrared ballistic missile system that can detect any kind of movement on the ground. So there are double dealings that are going on here. And secondly, with respect to the politics of marijuana and other things, particularly the real estate industry that dominates politics here in New York City, Governor Cuomo is expected to be indicted on corruption charges, and that is specifically around the closing of the Moreland Commission in January, around January 2nd. Thank you. I've enjoyed being here.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I think that, as far at the same time, we focus on the wars being waged for U.S. imperialism abroad against different populations. We don't forget about also the war being waged against our communities here, Black and Latino communities facing over-policing, immigration coming into our houses and destroying. That is actually an act of war, and that's how we see it as far as my organization. It's actually, and speaking of that, I actually want to let you know of an action that is going to happen on December 15 at 12 p.m. at noon. Bill Bratton, he is going to come to Hunter. He's the proponent of broken windows. And as far as I'm concerned, he's an enemy of my people and an enemy of our community. So if you want, it's going to be at 12 in Hunter, and as outside, it's going to be a rally. Come through, and thank you.
I'd like to reiterate that the agent for change is already within us. They have to wear uniforms. They are the working class, or a big part of the working class. They have faced layoffs already in the Army in October, significant cuts, and entirely likely there'll be cuts further in other branches of the armed services. Now, I'm not only speaking about the military in this country, I'm talking about the military throughout the world. I pointed out Greece, there are other armies, they're all under enormous pressures, which includes the IDF. There's no reason they can't be radicalized either. So that is, I think, the way to go if we want to change things.
Yeah, I mean, we may sort of get a little depressed about all this, but I think we have to keep in mind that these wars, although they are temporarily shoring up international capitalism, that these wars are so drain these economies in Europe and the United States so severely that as was pointed out, social programs are being cut, and the working class is more and more having to endure this, and this raises their consciousness. And there have been times in the past. There was a huge, significant anti-war movement, international, against the Vietnam War. And this did make a difference. And if you remember the beginning of the first Gulf War, remember those huge demonstrations throughout the world, millions of people. Yes, the whole thing was co-opted, but it does show that people throughout the world can unite, can get together, and now we have the degeneration of capitalism throughout the world with these austerity programs, and that will further force people to wake up.
We want to thank Joe Friendly and also Florindo for their camera work, and also the brother here has one 30-second bite. 1 30-second bite, it'll explode.
The School of America's Watch. Just wanted to reiterate around the drug war in Mexico, what's going on. It's actually, a lot of people seem to think it's more of a cover, that the drugs are the reason for that. It's not even, a lot of the traffickers are not even involved directly in the violence. It's the poor and the people and the indigenous who are being driven off their land, killed off, or dispossessed. And it's actually, it's a capitalist venture to take over, the areas which are restricted and unavailable to investment. So it's they're opening markets. That's what's going on there. And so I wanted people to understand a little bit about that. And also, School of America's Watch is going to have a border action next fall around this time, well, probably more around the election time, to call to attention to what's going on in Mexico. There's, since the last 8 years, is over 150,000 killed. So it's pretty, and there's mostly poor and indigenous who are those victims. So I just wanted to let people know about that. Okay.
Thank you, and thank everybody. Take care.